RRF Caserta.
South Italy, in English language.
If you've ever pushed an old computer like way past its limits, you probably know exactly how the crash happens.
Oh, absolutely. The fans just start screaming.
Right. But it's never the massive heavy software you're running that actually freezes first. You have your video editor rendering at maximum capacity, the processor's running incredibly hot, but the first thing that actually stops working is your mouse cursor.
Yeah, or your keyboard just completely lags.
Exactly. The tiny, background tasks that you rely on for basic control just drop out completely. And that's because the main system is hoarding all the energy just to stay alive.
It's essentially a perfect issue of bandwidth. Like, when the core processor is overheating, the system starts cannibalizing the power it usually reserves for basic everyday functions.
Right. The micro fails because the macro is on fire.
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
And well, when you lay out the Italian newspapers from today, Wednesday, March 18th, 2026, that overheating processor is really the only way to make sense of what we're seeing.
It really is.
We've pulled together the reporting from Avvenire, El Mattino, and La Sicilia. And for today's deep dive, our mission is to examine a deeply interconnected crisis. We want to trace how this massive overheating geopolitical conflict in the Middle East is secretly drawing power away from our domestic institutions.
Yeah, which is fascinating. We're watching these foundational justice systems just freeze up and lag.
And yet the ultimate reboot, the actual repair of these systems seems to fall entirely to local communities.
Which is incredibly counterintuitive, right? Because, the front pages today are absolutely dominated by these loud macro-level explosions.
Oh, definitely.
We're talking about missiles, international casualties, high-profile resignations. But the real narrative hiding under all that ink is a profound, almost invisible exhaustion.
Like a systemic fatigue.
Exactly. The West is experiencing systemic fatigue. The operating system is basically running out of RAM, and individuals are being forced to figure out how to function when those big overarching systems crash.
Well, let's jump right into that main heavy software that's currently melting the processor. Because the breaking news out of the Middle East today is intense.
It's unprecedented, really.
Yeah. Missiles from Tehran have actually struck Tel Aviv, resulting in 2 deaths. And in retaliation, Israel has bombed central Beirut.
Right.
At the exact same time, over in Baghdad, drones have attacked both the U.S. Embassy and the airport. And the incoming fire was so heavy, it actually triggered the CRAM defense systems.
Yeah, wow, the CRAMs.
Yeah, those automated rapid-fire turrets that literally spray a wall of bullets into the sky to shred incoming rockets. It's intense.
It's terrifying to even visualize.
And on top of all this, top Iranian figures have been killed in joint U.S.-Israel raids. We are talking about major strategic architects here.
Right, including Commander Soleimani and Ali Larijani, who was the head of the Supreme Security Council.
Yeah, and Larijani actually left behind a final testament on social media with a really specific phrase. He wrote, "Martyrdom is sacrifice."
And the sheer scale of that escalation just cannot be overstated. When figures of that historical and strategic weight are eliminated, the shockwaves are immediate.
You can definitely see it in the tactical scrambling happening right now.
Absolutely. Like, Italian soldiers are currently in the middle of evacuating Baghdad just to avoid the fallout on military bases.
Although, interestingly, Italian troops in Lebanon are choosing to stay put.
Right, explicitly stating they're remaining because, quote, the people ask us to.
Yeah, but the ripple effect hitting Washington is what really caught my eye. Joe Kent, the U.S. anti-terrorism director, has abruptly resigned.
Just walked right out the door.
Exactly. He didn't just quietly step down. He left expressing deep perplexity over the choice to attack Iran and publicly called the situation unprecedented.
Meanwhile, you have Donald Trump taking the exact opposite approach.
Right, projecting absolute ironclad confidence. He's quoted today saying he has no fear of another Vietnam.
It's a massive disconnect.
Totally. You have the political leadership projecting total control, but the anti-terrorism director, the guy whose literal job is to calculate risk, is throwing his hands up and leaving.
Yeah.
So is Kent's resignation just, normal bureaucratic friction? Or is the system genuinely starting to buckle under the weight of this escalation?
It points directly to a structural buckling. To understand why Kent is walking away, we really have to look at the geopolitical bottleneck driving this massive anxiety.
Right.
Lucia Capuzzi has a brilliant analysis in Avvenire that zeroes in on the Strait of Hormuz. She describes this body of water as a maritime door that is narrow but not fully blind.
Meaning it's a choke point, but everyone can see exactly what's happening inside it.
Yes, exactly. It is the jugular vein of the global energy supply. If that door closes, or even if shipping companies just, perceive that it might close, insurance premiums skyrocket.
Energy prices double.
Exactly. And inflation immediately hits the grocery store shelves in Rome, London, and New York.
Right.
So the West is frantically trying to manage this physical bottleneck.
Right, like Italy's defense minister, Guido Crosetto.
Yeah, he's floating the idea of a multilateral UN mission just to keep the shipping lanes open and keep everyone in agreement.
And at the exact same time, UN Secretary General Guterres is rushing to the European Council to try and manufacture some kind of diplomatic off-ramp.
Right, it's a scramble.
It sounds less like a coordinated military operation and more like, emergency triage. They're just trying to keep the global circulatory system from completely shutting down.
Which requires an astronomical amount of political and psychological energy. The machinery of Western foreign policy is practically overheating trying to manage this.
Like the computer processor.
Exactly. And that heat doesn't just stay contained in the Strait of Hormuz. It bleeds directly into the domestic psychology of Western nations.
Right.
The friction we see in military leadership, like Joe Kent deciding he could just no longer be part of the apparatus, that's a symptom of a much larger exhaustion.
And that brings us perfectly to Riccardo Rodelli's piece in Avenir. He makes a really provocative argument.
He does.
He writes that this war, which is ostensibly designed to, bend Iran to the West's will, is actually wearing down the West.
Yeah, the fatigue is palpable.
It really is. And what's fascinating is how seamlessly this geopolitical exhaustion translates into domestic political chaos. The processor is busy fighting a war, so the domestic user interface just starts freezing up.
The transition from international anxiety to local institutional gridlock is almost immediate. Because when a population is heavily stressed by global instability, their capacity to process complex domestic issues shrinks dramatically.
We see that playing out in real time with the Italian justice referendum, which is absolutely dominating the domestic pages today.
Okay.
The coverage reveals this deeply polarized, incredibly tribal landscape. On one side, you have Justice Minister Nordio aggressively arguing that his justice reform guarantees necessary balance and greater responsibility within the courts.
Right.
But then on the other side, opposition leader Ellie Schlein is rallying undecided voters in Naples with the slogan to defend the magistrates.
And we should probably be very clear with you, our listener, right here.
Oh, yes. Good point.
Whether you lean toward the Justice Minister's push for reform or you agree with the opposition's call to defend the magistrates isn't what we're evaluating today. We aren't here to arbitrate who has the better policy.
We are totally impartial here.
Exactly. What Il Mattino and Avenir are flagging isn't the policy itself, but the deteriorating quality of the public arena.
Absolutely. The focus in the reporting isn't about the specific legal merits of the reform. It's about how the debate has completely devolved.
Yeah.
Avenir actually publishes an editorial describing this entire referendum as a poisoned campaign. They even use a very heavy phrase, calling it a theft of democracy.
That's a strong claim.
It is. Their argument is that a highly nuanced structural legal issue has been completely flattened into these binary tribal slogans, and that basically deprives voters of the ability to make a genuinely conscious choice. But hold on, I struggle with this theft of democracy label a bit. I mean, isn't handing a complex issue directly to the voters the purest form of democracy we have?
You'd think so, yeah.
You take a question, you put it on a ballot, and the people decide. So how does giving the public the final say qualify as a theft?
It sounds like a paradox, I know,
Yes.
but it really gets to the very core of what Rodelli meant by the West wearing down. The theft described in the editorials doesn't happen at the ballot box itself.
Okay.
It happens in the preceding months. The theft occurs when the physical mechanism of democracy, like the actual casting of a vote, is weaponized, but the substance of informed debate has been entirely stripped away.
Ah, I see. Mechanism without substance. It's like having a steering wheel but no engine. You feel like you're driving, but you aren't actually going anywhere.
That is a perfect way to visualize it. I mean, think about the psychological state of the electorate right now. You have a population exhausted by inflation, terrified by the escalation in the Middle East, and just overwhelmed by geopolitical fatigue.
Yeah, people are burned out.
Exactly. They simply do not have the cognitive bandwidth to dissect hundreds of pages of intricate judicial reform. And recognizing this fatigue, Political leaders just feed them highly emotive, binary slogans.
Like defend the magistrates or guarantee balance.
Right. The nuanced public square collapses entirely. So yes, the voter gets a ballot paper, but they've basically been robbed of the critical context required to use it meaningfully.
Wow. So the system is lagging hard. But, if the public square collapses into tribalism, the actual institutions that rely on that public trust must be shaking too.
Oh, they absolutely are.
And when you look at today's papers, it is glaring. Even the most ancient, deeply entrenched legal systems are failing to execute their most basic functions.
The institutional unraveling is happening across the board, and the structural failures are shockingly basic, really basic.
Let's look at the Vatican. We have a massive update in what the press actually dubbed the trial of the century against Cardinal Becciu.
Right, a huge case.
Yeah. And the appellate court has just declared the trial a relative nullity. The entire process has to be repeated.
Which is wild.
The reason why is even wilder. The promoter of justice, Didi, submitted vast amounts of documentation to the court, but it was heavily redacted with omissus, which is the legal term for sections that are completely blacked out.
Right.
And the defense attorneys looked at this and successfully argued that you just cannot have a fair trial if you aren't allowed to actually read the evidence being used against you.
And the symbolism there is just staggering. I mean, consider what the Vatican represents. It is an institution built on centuries of canon law, projecting absolute moral and procedural authority.
Right. They are supposed to be the gold standard.
Exactly. They attempt to clean house in this incredibly high-profile financial corruption trial to prove their internal systems work, and the entire thing just collapses because the prosecution handed over pages covered in black ink.
It's crazy.
It screams of an administrative system that is fundamentally incapable of managing its own complexity.
And, well, when you have these massive top-down systems, whether it's international diplomacy, domestic referendums, or ancient legal courts, all failing to provide stability or basic fairness, the people living underneath them don't just sit there and wait for the crash.
No, they don't.
They move. And the newspapers today highlight a deeply physical manifestation of this institutional failure. We are looking at a massive human exodus, and it is happening in two entirely different directions at once.
It's basically a double hemorrhage. People are bleeding into the country and bleeding out of it simultaneously.
First, you have the desperate influx. The reporting covers the Sea-Watch NGO actively disobeying official orders just so they can land rescued migrants in Trapani.
Yeah.
And the human cost is horrific. There's a report of a shipwreck leaving 17 people dead and 62 missing in the Mediterranean.
It's heartbreaking.
We also get this ground-level reportage from Emergency's life support ship featuring interviews with individuals named Hassan, Musa, and Mohammed. They are risking the deadliest maritime route on Earth just dreaming of escaping war and violence. So that is the influx.
Right.
But then you turn the page to Avenir, and there's an article highlighting a staggering statistic from the Lombardian 22 research group. For every one qualified foreigner who enters Italy, 9 Italian graduates are fleeing the country to live abroad.
9 to 1.
9 to 1. And they are being driven out by stagnant low wages, impossibly high rents, and a total lack of cultural and economic investment in Italian cities.
It's a massive brain drain.
So I look at this contrast and I have to ask, are we looking at two completely isolated economic phenomena here, or are these both symptoms of the exact same institutional failure to protect human dignity?
When you cross-reference the reporting, they are absolutely symptoms of the exact same underlying disease. Both of these exoduses represent a frantic search for what the sociologists in the papers term a generative society.
A generative society.
Yes. Hassan, Musa, and Mohammed are fleeing the total collapse of physical security and rule of law in their home countries. Meanwhile, the young Milanese or Neapolitan graduates moving to London or Berlin are fleeing the collapse of economic and social mobility in theirs.
So they're both essentially abandoning the building because they can clearly see the structural math failing, even if they are, leaving through different exits.
Precisely. When massive macro institutions are completely paralyzed by fatigue, whether it's the UN failing to stop a drone strike or a domestic government failing to regulate a housing market, individuals are forced to uproot themselves just to find a baseline level of predictability.
Right.
They are looking for a system that actually generates a future rather than just extracting their time and energy.
And if those massive macro institutions are too fatigued to provide that future, where do people actually find it?
That's the big question.
Because the papers don't just leave us with the doom and gloom. The source material offers a really profound pivot here. When the top-down and globalized systems fail, we see these incredibly resilient, desperate, and highly successful attempts to rebuild dignity from the grassroots up.
Yeah, this is where the concept of the civil economy comes into play. It is the direct counterbalance to that systemic fatigue we've been talking about.
And these solutions are hyper-local. We aren't talking about multi-billion-dollar UN interventions here.
No, not at all.
For example, in Brazil, the papers highlight a project called Reciclando a Vida Recycling Life. It's a community project that restores dignity to fragile, discarded lives through organized community work.
It's amazing work.
It gives people who have been completely marginalized by the formal economy a sense of purpose, a set of rules, and a community.
They are quite literally reclaiming human value from what the macro system has deemed to be waste.
Yeah. And back in Italy, we see the exact same philosophy applied in Naples at a pizzeria called Porta Pazienza. Bring patience. They don't just serve food. They offer what they call a daily menu made of inclusion.
I love that phrase.
Right. They actively hire and integrate people who have been pushed to the very edges of society, people the state apparatus has largely forgotten.
It's the creation of a localized economy of care. You basically replace an extractive economic model with a generative one.
And this economy of care extends deeply into healthcare too, which is arguably where the system is most strained right now. The Catholic University has initiated a project in Kenya at the Ruaraka Uhainima Hospital.
Right.
But the model is totally different. They aren't just dropping off funding. They are training local medical staff side by side with pastoral assistants. They are treating the physical body, but they are also treating the human spirit.
Which is so crucial.
And we see this mirrored back in Italy. Paolo Benetti writes a compelling piece in Avenir about Law 38 on palliative care. And the way it is framed is just beautiful. It is the fundamental right to never have to say enough to pain relief.
Yeah.
It utilizes what they call the 3 H's, home, hospice, and hospital.
It's a completely holistic approach.
But, I look at these examples, like a recycling cooperative in Brazil, a local pizzeria in Naples, a palliative care ward utilizing the 3 H's, and they feel so incredibly small compared to the massive geopolitical threats we discussed at the start of this deep dive.
They do seem tiny in comparison.
Right. We started with missiles hitting Tel Aviv and drones attacking embassies, and we are ending with a menu of inclusion at a pizzeria.
Yeah.
So I have to wonder, is this intense focus on the hyper-local just a psychological retreat? Like, are we just hiding in our neighborhoods because the globalized world has become too terrifying to fix? Or is this the only scale where true, measurable care can actually happen?
Well, Leonardo Becchetti addresses this directly in his Avenir piece on the Generative Society, and his conclusion is vital. It is not a retreat.
Okay.
It's a strategic repositioning. Think back to your computer analogy from the beginning.
Right.
If the overarching operating system is irreparably glitching, you don't keep trying to force it to run. You focus on the local applications that still work. The antidote to global paranoia and the fatigue wearing down the West isn't going to be found in a perfectly drafted UN treaty.
Because they can't even agree on the treaty.
Exactly. As the Vatican trial showed us, those massive bureaucratic systems are currently bogged down in vetoes, red tape, and procedural nullities.
The processor just cannot handle the load anymore.
It really can't.
Yeah.
So the antidote becomes the radical reclamation of local agency. When that pizzeria in Naples hires someone the state has discarded, or when a palliative care nurse ensures a dying patient experiences the final moments of their life with dignity through the 3 H's, they were actively creating micro-communities.
Wow.
And these communities serve as a physical bulwark against marginalization. They are proving that while we as individuals might not have the power to keep the Strait of Hormuz open, we maintain absolute sovereignty over how we treat the person standing right in front of us.
That is an incredible reframing. Let's pull all these threads together because the through line here is just really powerful.
Yeah.
We started this deep dive looking at the macro explosions in the Middle East, the drone strikes, the missiles, and the calculated assassinations of major figures like Larijani and Soleimani.
Right.
And we saw how the immense stress of managing those global bottlenecks is causing a profound overheating fatigue in the West, forcing leaders like Joe Kent to simply walk away.
We then tracked how that geopolitical exhaustion drains the power from our domestic systems. We watched the public square collapse into tribal slogans during the Italian justice referendum.
Where the mechanism of voting remains, but the substance of the debate is stolen.
Exactly. We saw the Vatican's trial of the century fail over redacted pages. And we watched how that institutional paralysis leads directly to a double human hemorrhage: migrants risking the Mediterranean to find security, and young graduates fleeing their home cities to find opportunity.
But the journey through today's sources doesn't end in a system crash. It ends with the micro repairs happening quietly from the ground up.
Yeah.
From Reciclando a Vida in Brazil to the palliative care wards in Italy, these sources prove that the civil economy is actively rebuilding human dignity exactly in the spaces where the macro institutions dropped the ball.
It highlights a tension that, well, every single person listening to this has to navigate. You live out your days suspended between these massive shifting geopolitical tectonic plates and the immediate physical reality of your local neighborhood.
Yeah, it's a crazy balance.
It is. And it's incredibly easy to read headlines about CRAM defenses firing in Baghdad and feel entirely powerless. But these localized acts of generative care show us that the local scale is actually the only place our power truly exists.
It brings us right back to our overheating computer, or, I don't know, a building with a cracked foundation. If the global system is exhausting itself trying to forcibly brace the swaying top floors of a skyscraper that is fundamentally flawed, maybe the future of societal resilience isn't found in another multilateral military mission.
Yeah, right.
Maybe it's found in the foundation. So think about your own circle of influence today. If the world feels like the processor is running at maximum capacity and wearing down, what is your localized equivalent of a menu of inclusion? How do you start building the system back up from the ground floor?
Because a resilient foundation is only built one interaction and one community at a time.
That is the perfect place to leave it. Thank you so much for taking this deep dive into the sources with us today. We'll be back next time with a fresh stack of material to explore. Until then, keep questioning the structure.
RRF Caserta. South Italy in English language.